When it was my father-in-law's turn, his name was called, and he disappeared into the examination room with a nurse. However, as I tried to accompany him, the nurse stopped me. Feeling suspicious, I found myself being led in the opposite direction to a separate room. Inside was a slender doctor, his sharp eyes fixed on me. And then, as if making up his mind, he spoke up. "How much do you know?" "Excuse me?" Not understanding what he meant, I found myself gaping in confusion. "Oh, sorry. I mean," he continued hesitantly. His awkward response only increased my distrust. What was he trying to say? "Really, you're still as clumsy with words as ever," a voice interrupted. Turning to the sound, there stood my husband, who was supposed to be on a business trip. Why was he here? Ignoring my bewilderment, he said, "I want you to see this." As he spoke, he manipulated his phone and showed it to me. "Huh? No way, why?" I widened my eyes and stared at the screen intently. To my surprise, my pottery creations were being sold on an unfamiliar website. Shock and turmoil mingled, leaving my mind in disarray. Of course, I had no idea. Who could have done such a thing and why? I felt more sadness than anger swirling in my heart. "I need to check with Lee about something regarding Dad," his words made me start. What could he want to confirm about my father-in-law? I waited eagerly for my husband's next words. "My name is Maria. I live with my husband, Ken, and my father-in-law, Rick. It's a beautiful day today. The azaleas in the yard are starting to bloom," I said. "Is that so? It's already that time, huh?" Smiling beside me, my father-in-law is actually blind. I knew his eyesight had been poor for a while. His vision gradually narrowed, with the edges turning black. Without knowing the cause and with no progress in treatment, he managed with his wife's help. But after losing his wife, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Neither Ken nor I had expected him to lose his sight so quickly. Ken said he couldn't leave Rick alone, living independently despite being blind. "Yeah, it's dangerous living alone," I agreed. "Especially with all those scams going around," Ken added. After discussing, Ken and I decided to live with Rick. By the way, since my father-in-law couldn't work, he now receives disability benefits. Arranged by his late wife, with a substantial amount still remaining in his account. With so much on my plate, hiring a helper could have been an option, but my father-in-law wasn't having any of it. He was adamant that it would be a waste of money, so I dropped the idea. I quit my job to take care of Rick. My boss expressed regret, saying they wouldn't find someone as talented as me, but it couldn't be helped. I decided to work part-time a few days a week and took on the responsibility of caring for my father-in-law and managing household chores. "Maria, I'm really sorry about quitting your job. I expected it, so don't worry about it. How about you?" "Yeah, actually, the company has decided to expand overseas, so I might be traveling more from now on. My husband works for a manufacturing company, but I hadn't heard any talk of overseas trips until now." "That's amazing." I expressed my joy, but Ken had a somewhat troubled expression. "But I'm going to miss having you around, Maria." With a small sigh, he headed off to the bathroom with slumped shoulders. It felt like the first time I had seen him so dejected. He's usually all smiles, and he rarely talks about feeling lonely. So his words caught me off guard, and I was surprised. Was my enthusiasm misplaced? From the following month, as he had said, his business trips increased, and naturally, he was away from home more often. I found myself busy every day, preparing meals for my father-in-law, cleaning the house, and working my part-time job. However, while shopping at the supermarket, I couldn't help but think. Taking care of Rick was easier than I had anticipated. When we first moved in together, I had thought there would be a lot to do, like helping him bathe, assisting with his toileting, and helping him move around both inside and outside the house. I had even assumed I would have to feed him. But in reality, he could bathe alone, take care of himself in the bathroom, and eat fairly neatly with a spoon. He moved around the house smoothly and never stumbled over boxes or anything. "It's because I'm used to this house, nothing special," he said with a smile. What surprised me even more was that he could operate a phone with ease. Using voice recognition, he made phone calls and looked things up online. If I heard voices coming from his room, it was likely him having conversations with the phone's AI about something. Even I only use my phone for calls and messages. However, medical checkups were necessary, and Rick regularly went to the hospital. But even then, when I offered to go with him, he insisted on going alone for some reason. But there are crosswalks, and it's dangerous to go alone. It's okay, because it makes sounds. There's getting on and off the bus. I can manage on my own. Pouting, he left on his own, and I followed him worriedly. To my surprise, he crossed the crosswalks and got on and off the bus by himself without any trouble. Later, I learned that he used the phone's voice guidance. He stubbornly insisted on doing everything alone, almost as if he was trying to keep his distance from me. However, I was fortunate to avoid being overwhelmed by caregiving and household chores. With the time and mental space, I was able to attend pottery classes nearby. It was just a one-day experience, but it turned out to be unexpectedly enjoyable, and I was hooked right away. Since then, I've been studying pottery little by little at home. When I read pottery magazines, I found an intriguing headline. It said that small pieces could be fired in a household oven. As I read on, it seemed there was indeed such clay available. Since most of the items needed could be found at dollar stores, home pottery seemed easy to do. I found pockets of time and decided to sneakily pursue pottery at night. My art skills from elementary and middle school were low. Yet here I was, diving into pottery. Every day felt exciting, and I caught myself humming tunes. One night, as my husband came to the kitchen for some water, he caught me kneading clay while humming. "What are you making? Giant cookies?" He pointed to the flattened, light brown clay sitting on parchment paper. I was stretching it out to make plates.
Aww.
I was hoping for some late-night snacks. That's too bad. But you can see it when it's done. Good night. With that, he headed back to our room. He's off on another business trip tomorrow. He seemed like he wanted to chat a bit more, but perhaps out of consideration, he left quickly. It felt like we were passing by each other, yet not on bad terms, a strange feeling. To shake off that feeling, I focused on pottery. At first, I made simple things like plates. But as I got more comfortable, I found that wasn't enough. However, I couldn't make sophisticated pottery pieces. As I pondered what to create, a gust of wind blew documents and envelopes off my desk. I had forgotten to close the window in the afternoon. I hurriedly picked up the scattered papers and used a nearby bottle to hold them down. I've got it. A paperweight would be small and doable. Since I wasn't planning to showcase it anywhere, I decided to make it with a light heart. Something stylish would be nice. As I kneaded the clay, I remembered the cat we used to have. We rescued her as a stray, named her Belle, and cherished her with my husband. Let's model it after Belle. Once I had the idea, it came together quickly. I remembered her face, her paws, her tail, bit by bit. In the photos on my phone, Belle looked somewhat pleased as Ken held her. Back then, it was just the two of us and one cat, and we had a great time. Belle is now on the other side of the rainbow, but I wonder if she's doing well. After much trial and error, Belle's paperweight was completed in about a month. I was so happy, I wanted to show it to someone. Just then, I had plans to have lunch with friends, so I decided to bring it along to show them. My friends exclaimed, "How cute," and pointed their phone cameras at it. To my surprise, it was well received. Beside the pasta dishes at lunch, Belle's paperweight, with its somewhat indifferent expression, had a certain charm. My friends requested me to make one for them too. Are you sure? It's just an amateur's handmade piece. They actually liked that it was handmade. The next month, I brought several more Belle paperweights in different poses. My friends each chose a Belle they liked, and the one left on the table was the Belle paperweight washing its face. A week later, I realized I had received multiple messages from the friend I gave the Belle paperweight to. According to her, after she posted the paperweight on social media, she received dozens of emails in just 3 days. Most of them were inquiries about where to buy it, even though it was just a hobby piece. I was surprised by the overwhelming response. My friends strongly suggested I sell them online. They were sure they'd sell like hotcakes. However, I wasn't making them to sell. I simply saw it as a hobby, and the idea of selling it for money felt uncomfortable. Besides, I'm not savvy with the internet, so I barely touch my phone, checking messages from friends only every 2 or 3 days. As I pondered what to do, the inquiries via email kept pouring in, surpassing 100 messages. Perhaps feeling sorry, my friends started insisting on paying me properly. But it's me who should feel sorry. I've asked my friends on social media to reply with a not for sale to those inquiring about it. The topic came up again during another lunch. In that case, how about just covering the cost of materials? I'm not establishing myself as a pottery artist. That's sufficient because I'm just doing it for fun. When Ken returned from his business trip, he found the bell paperweight placed on the desk and exclaimed, "Huh. Hold on, is this Belle? Did you make this?" He lifted it up with his index finger and thumb, then brought it over to me with excitement. "That's right. Looks like her, doesn't it?"
Yeah.
"It's great. Because it's so cute. This bell looks really alike." When I mentioned the minor buzz on social media, my husband smiled. "Selling online is easy. Just set up a website and post photos. Easy to say, hard to do. Ever heard of easier said than done? I'll help. After all, I'm still an active salesman." He patted his chest confidently. He was enthusiastic, starting to strategize about the e-commerce site and mumbling about it. However, selling meant starting a business to some extent. I don't have the confidence to start it lightly. I'm not interested in selling. Taking the bell paperweight from his hand, I put it back on the desk. And besides, I'm not good with anything internet related. I'll support you. Oh, by the way, I finished that plate the other day. I'll go get it. I turned around and opened the kitchen cabinet. I couldn't see Ken's expression. When I returned from the kitchen, he was gone. Only Belle, washing her face, remained on the desk. "Belle, what should I do?" Belle didn't answer. She just kept washing her face, as if saying, "I don't know." One day, with the sky filled with fluffy clouds. As I returned home humming, my father-in-law asked, "Did something good happen today?" On this day, I had gone to show the bell paperweight to my pottery class teacher. I had hinted at doing pottery to my father-in-law before, but we hadn't talked about it much. I went to show my pottery pieces to the teacher I mentioned before. Seated in the living room, Rick listened to my voice. "Oh, what kind of plate is it?" "It's not a plate this time, it's a figurine." As I said that, I felt something strange. What did Rick just say? While I pondered, he smiled and said again, "I wish I could do pottery too." Really? I couldn't believe my ears, but I saw this as a good opportunity. It could be a chance to get closer to Rick, who seemed to be keeping his distance. That way, I wouldn't have to worry about him doing dangerous things like crossing the street alone anymore. "Of course, you can do it. I'm sure of it. After all, you're quite handy. Even without sight, there are people who can paint." I let my father-in-law touch sample plates, teaching him to shape the clay into similar forms. Despite his lack of sight, he kneaded the clay, feeling the shapes with his fingertips repeatedly. He seemed to enjoy the fresh and fun sensation of the clay, continuing to make them even while I was at work. When I came back, several pieces were lined up on the cooking sheet. They might be a bit uneven in shape, but they were all adorable. "Wow, you're really good at this." Careful not to disturb them, I took them to the drying shelf. I monitored the drying process and baked each one in the oven. During this time, another strange feeling arose. "Oh, bell that I left here seems to be missing." The bell paperweight, which should have been on the desk, was gone. I also noticed that the rabbit and frog figurines I left were missing. When I asked Rick, he speculated that he might have mistakenly broken or thrown them away. Maybe because I always carried them around as samples. "I'm sorry." "I see. I'm really sorry. All because of my lack of sight, even the cat figurine." He apologized as if he deeply regretted it, and I couldn't press him further. It's okay. Maybe.
Yeah.
It must have been taken by the little people. I decided to laugh it off with such a childish excuse, which seemed to put my father-in-law at ease. Despite his continued creativity, I began to feel a distinct unease about his actions. When I mentioned this to my husband, he looked surprised. Well, I'm usually not around due to work or business trips. He shrugged, claiming he didn't know. In the midst of these bewildering days, the day of my father-in-law's regular checkup arrived. My husband was away on a business trip from morning. Seems like I've gotten a bit closer to my father-in-law through pottery, so today I was going along. We arrived at the hospital around noon and presented the examination ticket at the reception, waiting for our turn in the waiting room. The receptionist seemed to be talking about something while looking over here. But it might not necessarily be about me or Rick. Thinking I might be overthinking it, I lowered my gaze to the pottery magazine I brought. Eventually, Rick's name was called, and he disappeared into the examination room with the nurse. However, when I tried to accompany him, I was stopped by the nurse. I wonder why. This was my first time coming with my father-in-law, so maybe they were checking who I was. Feeling suspicious, I was guided in the opposite direction of the examination room and into another room. Inside, a slender doctor was sitting, handing a clear file to the nurse. Once the nurse left, the doctor turned his gaze towards me. I looked at his name tag, which only said Dr. Lee. His almond-shaped eyes stared at me intently, and he opened his mouth decisively. How much do you know? Yes. What is he talking about? Confused, I stared at Dr. Lee with my mouth agape. I reckon it's about my father-in-law's eyesight, but something's off about it. Today's the first time I've come to accompany him for an examination, so even if you ask how much I know. Oh, sorry. Didn't explain it well. Basically, that. His awkward response got me feeling more skeptical. What is it? So? All of a sudden, he stared behind me. When I turned, there stood Ken, who was supposed to be on a business trip. Geez, you're still as awkward as ever. As he sighed, I couldn't help but be surprised. Ken, what are you doing here? I came to ask Lee about something concerning Dad. Concerning Dad, those words caught me off guard. What could Dr. Lee have to confirm with Ken concerning him? From the way he casually called Lee, it seemed they were pretty close. Apparently, they've been friends since their student days. I also have something I want to confirm. It's about Rick. It made me suddenly flustered. Please tell me about his usual behavior. His usual behavior. I talked about everything from when he wakes up in the morning to when he goes to bed at night. He can bathe and go to the bathroom alone, eats his meals properly, and can attend regular checkups and come home by himself. At home, he enjoys chatting on his phone. As I described Rick's everyday casual behavior, Dr. Lee nodded in understanding. I also mentioned that my father-in-law recently started pottery and keeps himself busy with it even when I'm not around during the day. I showed him pictures of my father-in-law's pottery pieces that I had taken with my phone. The recent works are shaping up nicely, and the irregularities are disappearing. Dr. Lee let out a small sigh when he saw them. Anything else? Especially anything strange you noticed about Rick's words or actions? Asked like that, I pondered for a while. The only thing that came to mind was that even though he's supposed to be completely blind, he insists on doing everything by himself. It seemed like he was trying to keep his distance from me somehow. I see. Anything else both Aaron you? Come to think of it. I remembered. Just a few days ago, several of my pottery pieces went missing from the house. When I asked Rick, he said he might have accidentally thrown them away because he couldn't see them. But something about that didn't sit right with me. Digging a little deeper, I recalled the unease I felt just before he expressed his desire to start pottery. I told the pottery teacher that I was going to show him my work. But at that time, my father-in-law said, "What kind of plates are they?" I thought it might be a minor thing. But he seemed to recognize them as plates quite clearly. It was as if he had seen me making plates before and knew about it, even though I hadn't shown him any. Then Ken spoke up again. I want Maria to see this too. As he said that, he showed me his phone. There was a photo of the paperweight of the bell I thought was missing. Upon closer look, it had a price tag on it, and it seemed to be listed on some sales website.
What? Why?
I widened my eyes and stared at the screen. I didn't remember putting it up for sale, so why is it here? Shock and confusion mingled, leaving my head spinning. Instead of anger, a sense of sadness swirled in my heart. Did you really not know about this site or that your work was being sold online? Looking at my husband with a solemn expression, I nodded.
Yeah.
I have no idea about this. Who on earth would do such a thing? We'll find out soon enough. Muttering cryptically, he dialed someone up. Dr. Lee also nodded along as he watched my husband. Feeling completely lost, I just watched the two of them. Oh, hello, is this the police? Seeing my husband call the cops left me dumbfounded. Let's rewind 2 days. During a break with his coworkers, my husband was introduced to a website specializing in selling cat figurines. Apparently, he was asked to check it out because there was a figurine that caught his interest. They showed it to me just because it had a design of a face washing. The moment he saw it, my husband had a gut feeling it was the bell paperweight I made. When he showed me the seller's info, it claimed to sell pieces to fund stray cat rescue efforts. The artist was described as blind from birth, and Ken had a bad feeling about it. The artist's name is Rick, blind from birth. And the figurine I've seen before. Only one person came to mind who could get hold of this. It's hard to imagine you being involved. You said you weren't interested in selling. Ken also remembered the unease I felt. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't heard about your story. Maybe. Dad is. He might not be blind after all. My hesitant husband's words were taken over by Dr. Lee. Just 2 days ago, he contacted me about his dad. He was genuinely surprised when I told him I was handling it. Dr. Lee actually had doubts about Rick's eyesight. He showed signs of blindness during the examination, yet his gait and movements didn't seem like those of a blind person. He felt the same, and so did the nurses. We don't want to suspect the patient, but... When he said that with his head down, the corridor suddenly became noisy. As we hurried out of the room, we saw my father-in-law being questioned by 2 police officers. He seemed to be shouting something and appeared to be in a panic. Rick! I tried to rush over, but Ken grabbed my arm and stopped me. Shortly after, my father-in-law brushed off the police officer's hands and dashed out at full speed. There were many patients in the waiting room, and if he collided with them, it wouldn't end well. But he gracefully avoided both the chairs in the waiting room and the patients and nurses there. It was as if a soccer player was skillfully evading the opponents near the goal. While everyone was stunned, the 2 police officers quickly chased after my father-in-law and caught him in no time. Let me go! I am blind! His cry echoed in vain, as it was evident that he could see. The 2 policemen stood my father-in-law up and took him away for questioning. Subsequent interrogation revealed that Rick had created and operated a fraudulent sales website. On that site, not only his own pieces but also some of mine were being sold. It appears the motive was money, but claiming it was for stray cat rescue funds turned out to be a lie. He confessed he did it because his pension wasn't enough to get by on. After the commotion at the hospital, local media showed up every day, requesting interviews. The story of my father-in-law pretending to be blind, deceiving even his own family, and selling handmade cat figurines became a small news item. Sorry, can't comment, became my daily response through the intercom. As for Rick, he's been avoiding coming out, knowing the whole neighborhood is giving him the side-eye, hiding under the covers. In a pinch, we turned to his brother, Tim. He's a former self-defense force member, known for his tough demeanor. Despite being generally very kind, he was furious this time, unable to forgive Rick for his actions. Despite living about 3 hours away by train, Tim flew over with a fierce expression. How pathetic. Gonna straighten him out at my place for a while. He yanked off the covers, grabbing Rick by the collar, who was trembling. Please stop. Don't want to go outside. Despite sobbing and clinging on, Rick couldn't match up to Tim, aka the drill sergeant. Leaving with just an apology, Tim took Rick back home on the train. My father-in-law has always respected Tim. He won't cause any more trouble. Hopefully, he'll live straight from now on, my husband murmured, sounding sad. Ken promptly shut down the site Rick made, but unexpected things were happening online. Today, that coworker told me. Photos from the supposedly closed site were being circulated on social media by someone who saw the site. Compared to the cat figurines made by my father-in-law, mine were getting attention for their gentle expressions. It seems the popularity stems from the creator's personality shining through, sparking a chain of positive reviews. My coworker even said they wanted the Belle paperweight. Ken said, a little excited, looking really happy. But, the site's closed, and I'm not too keen on online selling. About that. Ken eagerly started. It turns out, my husband's coworker knows someone who runs a variety shop in the neighborhood. The shop owner saw my work on social media and wanted to feature it in her store but couldn't find contact info. Nearby, huh? You mean, that stylish shop at the corner?
Yeah.
How about visiting them tomorrow? With his suggestion, I decided to visit the store right away. The shop owner wore lots of cat accessories, clearly a big cat lover. I agreed to her offer and left my work in her store. Later, I brought in not just the paperweights but also plates for display. Feeling a mix of happiness and anxiety about whether they'd sell, I decided to name the artist Belle Cat and put them up for sale. To my surprise, they sold out one after another. Although the sales were just pocket money, I was filled with surprise and joy. I decided to donate a portion to stray cat rescue efforts. I thought Belle would appreciate that. Thanks to this donation activity, I've made more connections with fellow stray cat advocates and local artists. It seems even the ceramics experience teacher drops by occasionally. Every day is fulfilling and fun. They even call me Belle now. It's a bit embarrassing to be called by my cat's name, but it's surely a bond that kid brought. Right? Belle. I gaze at the Belle paperweight on the living room desk. I'm back. Ken, who had returned home without me noticing, approached with a big smile. I wonder what's up. Today's our wedding anniversary and the day we first met Belle, he said, placing a cake box next to the Belle paperweight. Oh, right. Filled with happiness, I hugged Ken without thinking. Belle just washed her face, smiling as if to say, I don't know.